Again, good evening. My name is Trey Kramer. I'm an assistant superintendent for high schools here in Humble ISD, and I will serve as our moderator tonight. I want to welcome you to our third town hall meeting. Certainly, I've had two really good ones up to this point. We feel like we'll have another good one tonight, and we look forward to interacting and having great conversations between you guys and Dr. Fagan. I do want to make a couple of housekeeping announcements. First of all, I want to thank Texan Live for live streaming, so we are being live streamed tonight. Number two, as far as our timetable, we have set 6 to 8 o'clock. My job as the moderator is to try to keep us moving forward and get as many questions asked as possible. And at 7:50, the last question we'll take, that'll be the last question we take at 7:50. If we get questions that go beyond 7:50, I'll take those questions and we'll make sure we get questions answered either through an FAQ or through the website. But we've been very conscious of the time, nighttime, school, activities, tomorrow, work, all that. So we will cut it off at 7:50, and I'll work very diligently to do that with courtesy and professionalism. A couple things. As you entered in tonight, obviously we have two microphones, one on the right, one on the left. We'd ask you to go the one that's the nearest to you. We also know that they're in an audience of this size. Sometimes there are questions that you might want to have asked that you don't want to ask, and my job as the moderator is to ask those questions. So our public communications, if everybody will turn around and kind of look back, they have cards, index cards, and pens. If you have taken cards and you have written a question at any point in time, if you will just raise your hand up, they'll come pick them. They will slip them in. And what I'll do is, depending upon how many numbers I get throughout the night, I'll work them in a timely fashion to keep us moving forward. The only other thing that we're asking is that when you come to the mic, we ask that you ask one question and then you return to your seat. There is no open dialogue back and forth. The question gets asked, and then Dr. Fagan gets the opportunity to answer the question. If you would like further clarification on that, certainly pop back up and ask for clarification or ask an additional question. Other than that, I do want to introduce a young lady that's with us tonight, Miss Lorena Correll. Lorena, come on up, please. We always want to make sure when we're doing public either town hall meetings or forum meetings that we have an opportunity for anybody that is a Spanish speaker and needs a translation. She'll make an announcement about that and then hand the microphone back to me. I'll make one more introduction and we'll get started. So again, thank you guys for being here. Looking forward to a good time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. It's my pleasure to be providing a translation to the Spanish and the back part of the auditorium. And welcome everybody. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So if there's anybody that needs that at any point in time, Lorena will be located in the my right, your left, if we need any help there. So without further ado, hopefully you have your questions. I think the key for us, our goal is to get every question answered, and so we lose some time with people hesitating. If you know you're going to have a question or you have one, just go ahead and get ready, pop in anytime, we'll work it in. And again, it's really, we want it to be like a family conversation. At the end of the day, that's what it's all about. That's why we're in an intimate setting, and Dr. Fagan will answer your questions. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our board president, Mr. Keith Lopez.
Thank you, Trey. First of all, thank you so much for coming tonight. This is an opportunity for y'all to have a chance to meet our new superintendent, Dr. Fagan, and get to know her by asking her questions. That really is the best way to know somebody, is to grill them, I guess. And I want to thank so much. This is our last town hall that we're going to have, and I want to thank Bert Brocker and Texan Live for all the work that they've done in videoing these town halls. And the two previous town halls are up online, and so you can log into TexanLive.com and watch the two previous town halls and this one as well, because they'll stay online. Without further ado, I just want to introduce Dr. Fagan and let her answer your questions. Feel free to ask any questions you want. There are going to be no questions that are going to be frowned upon. You don't even have to state your name. Just come up and ask those questions. And also, if, again, like Mr. Kramer said, like Trey said, if you want to just write down your question, you can just hand that to someone and it'll be asked anonymously. So again, thank you for coming, and Dr. Fagan.
Well, good evening. I think are we going to turn the mic up? Is it on? All right, now we got it. Okay. I just couldn't hear it. All right. So thank you so much for being here tonight. I really appreciate it. I know that there's probably 100 different things you could be doing tonight, and the fact that you came to spend your evening with me is very appreciated. And later I'm going to talk a little bit about the fact that, I really value relationships and our collaboration and working together to decide where we want to go as a community and as a school district. And it's through opportunities like this that I really get to know your voice, your ideas, your thoughts, your concerns, so that as we do move forward, I have those in the back of my head and understand at a high level sort of the overall sentiment of the staff, the students, the community, the parents, and others on various topics impacting the school district. So I apologize for those of you who have been here more than once, because I'm going to do this little thing at the beginning, just a brief introduction to me, or as I kind of affectionately call it, the speed dating version of getting to know me. For those of you who have been here more than once, then you could probably do it for me, and I apologize for that. But for those of you who are new tonight, I wanted to just start with a little bit of an overview of who I am and how I've gotten to this place in my career and frankly in my life. So I started out as the daughter of a high school English teacher, a single parent, and ultimately when I got into 8th grade, my mother became or actually I think it was 7th grade, my 7th grade English teacher. And so as you might imagine, it's a lot of fun to have your parents in middle school with you, and that was no exception for me. That was the case. And then when I was in 6th grade, my mom actually got remarried and married my high school social studies teacher. And so my entire existence in pre-K through 12 at some point felt like I had my parents in school with me, which was fine, but when you're a student, maybe not your favorite thing. And so there were a lot of nights at the dinner table where we talked about all things school. And before my mom was remarried, I spent a lot of time at school because she signed up for a lot of extra events, whether it would be taking tickets. She taught at Upward Bound at Central College in the summer, all of those things to make additional money and to get things to work out. And so I was always around education, always listening to education conversations, and so typical of some teenagers, the last thing I wanted to do was go into education because that was what my parents were doing. And so I went to college in pre-medicine, really believing that I loved science, and my grandmother had always told me I should be a doctor. She ultimately probably would be proud, but it wasn't the doctor she was hoping for. So anyway, I went to college to do pre-medicine, took all these science courses. At the same time, I was a Pizza Hut waitress because that's how I paid for my gas and all of those kind of things. And being a Pizza Hut waitress, I think I made about $1.75 an hour plus tips. So one of my professors, his name was Dr. Zaire, I had taken almost every course he offered. And he came to me and he said, I've been asked to be the interim dean of the university because our dean has gotten a promotion in another position, and there's no way I can do all of my course load. And so I'm thinking, okay, what does this have to do with me? And he says, so I'm wondering, would you be willing to teach the lab portion of my biology for elementary teachers course? And it's interesting because you'll see as I go forward that always I've really been blessed. I feel very lucky. I've always throughout my life and career had these people who would come to me and offer me opportunities that I really didn't see coming, that ultimately kind of created this path that just emerged in front of me. And so at the time I was kind of, well, I'm not sure if I have time, Dr. Zaire, really want to help you out, and then he said, I'll pay you. And so again, I was a Pizza Hut waitress, so I said, absolutely. And I taught the course. And I have to tell you that the very first day, I'll never forget walking into that lab, and I had all of my stuff prepared. I mean, I knew how to do it because I'd listened to my mother do it for years and years and years. I sat with her while she graded papers. She used to read me the papers she was grading when I was little. So I knew what I needed to do. And so I went in, I taught this lab, and I loved it. I loved every minute of it. I would have done it for free. And I immediately went and signed up to be an education major, science education major, and became a high school science teacher. And I taught biology and chemistry and ultimately advanced biology. I taught some physical science and enjoyed all of those things. And much like Dr. Zare, I had this principal named Rick Hilbert who came to me one day and said, sometimes my assistant principal, Roger Campbell, has to be gone. Would you mind substituting for him in the office? And I said, sure, I'd like to try that. And again, I loved teaching, but I loved that too. I loved helping students with their individual circumstances, talking with parents, working through challenges, helping my colleagues on the staff. And so I became a high school principal. And I was a high school principal, and I was really happy doing that. And I met my husband, and we got married, and I was pregnant, and I had everything planned out perfectly because that's the way I like it. And my dissertation chair, Sally Beiser, came to me and said, you know, Des Moines Independent School District has an executive director of high schools open, and you should go do that. And I was pregnant, and I thought, no, I've got this all planned out. I've got enough sick days. I know exactly how this is going to work. I'm ahead of schedule on all the things I need to do. And she said, just go see. So I went, and I applied, and I interviewed in Des Moines. And again, I fell in love with the position, the people, the challenge. I knew that the students needed me. I'll never forget Dr. Linda Lane, who ultimately became the superintendent in Pittsburgh, I believe, saying to me, you know, these kids need you more. And so I worked supporting the high school principals in Des Moines and all the alternative school principals. And then the superintendent changed, and there was a pretty significant reorganization. I applied to be an associate superintendent with a pre-K through 12 region of the city, and I earned that position. And boy, it stretched me. I learned so much, and it was so timely because here I had this little child, Meredith, and the thing that happened to me is I thought I was a really good educator and a pretty good leader, but when you become a parent, you get even better as an educator and even better as a leader because you start to see every circumstance in education through the eyes of a parent. And the eyes of a parent is different. And so to have both of those lenses come together really made a difference for me. And so I started to work with PK through 12, all the different levels and situations in the Des Moines Independent School District, and grew a lot. And then my parents retired and went to Arizona. And so I decided that it was a good idea for me to go so that Meredith could be near her grandparents. And so my husband and I agreed, and I applied and became the superintendent in Tucson Unified School District in Arizona. And Meredith was 3 when we went, and so 2 years later, she's turning 5, she's getting ready for kindergarten. And I'd worked through so many challenges in Tucson. Tucson's a federal desegregation district. We were forced to bus our kids. And probably the most significant challenge in that district was the fact that Arizona just didn't fund education. And so when I left there in 2010, they were paying about $3,100 per student in the state of Arizona for education. And that is it's over $3,000 less per student than they fund in Texas. And Texas is higher than Colorado, but putting together a quality education that involves electives and arts and athletics and activities and all the things that all children should have the opportunity to experience on $3,100 was just about impossible to do. And so when the opportunity came before me to go to Douglas County, and I was pregnant with Olivia, by the way, and I thought, you know, I really need to think about this because Meredith is going to go into kindergarten, and I'm so committed to her having a quality education. I know the power of that educational experience, and I know the struggle in Arizona with the funding. So I interviewed in Douglas County on a Sunday, Monday. My husband drove me home 14 hours on a Tuesday, and I had Olivia on Friday, the same day that they announced me the lone finalist for the position. And we went to Douglas County, and Olivia was 3 months old, and Meredith was 5 and going to kindergarten, and embarked on a really challenging journey in a community that had a different set of interests in education than I'd ever experienced before. A community that believed strongly in parent choice, the ability for a parent to choose the school for their child. Douglas County had the first charter school in Colorado in 1993. I graduated from high school in 1992, so I wasn't there for that. But at the same time, a really strong position on that. And when I came into the district, there was 7 subcommittees on a big committee of choice that the board was working with. And those 7 subcommittees had recommendations that we were directed as staff to fold into our district strategic plan. And so in the spring of 2011, we launched the first strategic plan there, and one of the major priorities in it was choice, because that was a very strongly held position in that community. Much like federal desegregation was a strong part of the context of Tucson, the whole notion of student and parent choice was a strong part of Douglas County, but neither of those exist here in Humble. So 6 years later, I've been in Douglas County those 6 years, and we had taken on some really rigorous things instructionally and educationally, the things that are really my passions. Things like there was no curriculum when I arrived, and we needed to build one. And there were no local assessments that were more about assessing and less about testing, and so we had to build some. And there was no professional development aligned to the needs of teachers, and there were all kinds of state laws and mandates that were coming down. And so I made a commitment to that community, to those teachers, that I would be there to support them in creating curriculum and in building new assessment systems that they wanted and creating professional development systems that served their needs. And I believe after 6 years I had done that. I had fulfilled that commitment. I had built the capacity. The teachers of Douglas County can move forward in the very best interest of students with or without me. And in my view, that is what leadership is about. It's not about creating a circumstance where everything is dependent on one person. Instead, it's about creating a system that thrives and grows with or without that person. And so since it was 6 years later, and since the capacity had been built and incredible things were happening for students in alignment with the values of that community, my husband and I sat down and, you grow up as you go along in life, and you start to figure out what's the most important thing to you as a family, and where you will thrive and where your children will really fit in and have a great life and future. And so we literally laid down a map of the United States, because we're both science nerds. He's an engineer. I told you my background was in science, and we just really love sort of an analytical approach to things. And we started crossing off states based on our values and the things that we care about most. And ultimately, we got down to one state left on the map, and that was Texas. And then we started to look at school districts that would be a match for our family, not just the school district, but also the community, and a match for me professionally, a place where I could come together with great educators interested in educating children in a way that best meets their unique needs moving forward into the future. And we did a lot of analysis. There were actually quite a few openings in the state. As you know, there's a lot of school districts here. And we continued down this path until there was one school district that remained on the list. And that was Humble Independent School District. And so I got together my stuff and I applied for this position, because we spent a lot of time. We even had friends who came here for spring break. They were going to Texas anyway. And since they were coming, they said, hey, do you want us to do some stuff for you while we're there? And yeah, sure. So they visited places and took pictures and actually went to a couple of schools. That's how thorough we were in our analysis of where we wanted to be for our family, and where we felt that we could put down roots and contribute to a community. And so I applied, and I have to tell you that I'm honored, I'm excited. Everything that I thought has come true when I was offered the opportunity to serve as the superintendent. And I know that I have huge shoes to fill with Dr. Sconzo, and he's been an incredibly supportive person throughout this transition. But I know also that we have incredible people here focused on what's best for children, who are interested in making sure that they continue to grow and progress. And that's exactly where I know that I can best serve as a leader in a place like that. And it's exactly where I know that my children will be very happy and learn and grow and all of those things that we all want for our children in this school district. So with that, that's kind of the overview of where I've been. And along the way, I got my doctorate at Drake. I mentioned my dissertation chair. And I've had a lot of wonderful opportunities that have, I didn't start out planning. I never sat down in my bedroom and said, geez, someday I want to be a superintendent. But as time went on and as I learned more, a lot like our journey as a family, figuring out where the right place for us is, you just sort of figure out what your strengths are and how you can lend those strengths to other people to ultimately give students something better than they had before and support teachers and leaders in their growth and development. And that's what I hope to do here, and I believe that's one of the things that that's kind of the piece of the package, that, if you will, that I was selected to do. So, with that high-level overview, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about anything that's on your mind.
I just read this article from the Tribune, Jacqueline Velka, I believe how the name is pronounced, and I finally know what that whole Douglas issue was all about. After reading that article, I was really disappointed with the Houston Chronicle and the Observer. I read their articles and still didn't understand what the issue was. But put that to the side. A couple of issues. First of all, it sounds to me like you're going to be stepping into a new whole controversial situation here with this new innovation, DOI. I forgot exactly what those words are. And the legislature passed it, and they're talking about teachers not having to be certified in order to save money or something like that. And I was reading a book about education around the world, and there was a country in Northern Europe where the teachers are so highly respected, and it's very difficult to become a teacher in this country. And I'm thinking, well, I'm comparing that with this new situation with teachers not having to be certified in order to save money or whatever. And then the other issue was how much is a student motivation a problem or an issue with you or in the school district that you've been in?
So the first question is about District of Innovation and so I want to give a little bit of context to this. So at the end of May, Dr. Sconzo called me and said, we have a situation where we've always used a calendar that allows for late starts and early releases in our district. And we've always applied for a waiver from the Department of Education for this calendar. And for the first time, our waiver has been denied. And he said, they have let us know that we have to apply for District of Innovation status in order to use the same calendar that we've always used for a very long time. And I think I even said, well, that's bad timing, but anyway, he said, yes, I agree, it's short notice, it's not ideal, but the moral of the story is this is the calendar our schools are planning on, and so we're going to do what we have to do to try to get the waiver that we've always had to move this forward. And in addition to that, I know that there are other things within the whole idea of District of Innovation, but the reason that this district is applying for it is so that we can continue to do the same things that we've always done. It's just that the state has changed the rules. So the only certification issue that I'm aware of is around current technical education, where you have sometimes instructors that are current technical certified that are not necessarily teachers. So I know in previous districts that I've been in, we had automotive instructors, plumbing, fire science. We had a chief who is a former fire chief and who actually taught students fire science who wanted to become firefighters. And so in current technical education, sometimes you want different looking certification, not traditional certification, so that you can offer those programs to kids and not make Chief Piccone, who was the chief there, go through a teacher certification program. So that's the only one that I'm aware of. You know, a lot of times people will talk about, well, let's just get rid of certification or this and that. But remember this, that just because the state does this or that doesn't mean we would hire people without certification. So it's ultimately our decision. However, there is no intention within the District of Innovation to move away from certification. It's just allowing the flexibility in the current technical education areas for people who are specially trained in those particular skills. So that's the only one that I'm aware of that there's any conversation about. So I know there's been a lot of stuff like, well, what about this and what about that? But what I want you all to know is that we're working very hard to just move forward the same calendars, the same things that we've done in the past. And the state has just changed the rules, so we're just trying to comply with that. And yes, there are a whole lot of things on the District of Innovation sort of menu, but we're not subscribing to the other things on the menu. And in fact, if we ever wanted to, let's pretend we all got together and said, yeah, we want to do X. We would have to take it back to the committee to do that. So I just want to make sure we're all clear on that, because I know there has been some confusion in the coverage, and that's fair. We just need to make sure that we have good information.
I've got a question, Wayne.
Okay.
Got several questions.
All right.
Okay, could you please name 3 initiatives you have started with dealing with kids in poverty?
So one thing that I'm very transparent about is that I believe in a personalized approach to education. And so initiatives make me nervous, because sometimes initiatives are also called programs. And programs we've tried for a long time in education to try to think, oh, this must be the silver bullet. We'll just do this program and everything will be fixed. But the reality is that education is an extraordinarily personal endeavor, and that what we need to do, and what I have done, is support teachers in really understanding well the students in front of them, regardless of their circumstances. Their unique circumstances are their own, and we are here to understand what those are, what that child's goals are, and then to put together the best pathway forward for that student in partnership with their parents, if the parents are able to be our partners. Sometimes that's not a possibility, but sometimes it is, and it's the best case scenario that we all work in partnership together. But the idea of initiatives, I remember when I was in Des Moines, and Title I came down with what they called Reading First. And all the Title I schools and teachers in Des Moines were required, not by me, but required to go to this Reading First training, where they not only taught them exactly what to say and what to do, but they taught them where to move in the room when, as if it didn't matter which students were in front of them when they were teaching. And we all know that's just not the case. When you talk with students, and I've talked with many, or when you sit down with seniors when they're graduating and you say, tell me about the very best teacher you ever had, it's the teacher who knew them well, who challenged them the right way, who customized things in a way that made sense for them, and still was very rigorous in their approach. They expected a lot, but it wasn't without the relationship first. And so as we move forward about students in poverty, you know, a lot of students are unique and have different attributes of being either at risk or gifted and talented, or there's so many different categories, if you will, and I even hesitate to do that. But there's so many unique qualities of students that what we're learning in education is that the very best way to reach each one is to know what those are, to know what the goals are, and then put that student on a pathway toward that goal, and not just do an application of a program for everybody in a certain category, because there's different reasons why students are struggling in fill in the blank. There's different reasons why a student's struggling to read or to do math or to show up to school. And it's about figuring that out and not just saying, well, if X, then Y, because it's not as simple as that. If it were, we wouldn't have the challenges we have in education today. So initiatives that I have started, I wouldn't say that there's ever been a program that I've laid out there and said, okay, everybody who's in a Title I school will do this. Instead, my approach has been to meet with unique and individual schools and sometimes teachers and really talk about where do we want to go, what are the challenges we're facing, and lending my expertise and my coaching to that situation, and making sure, that's the other role that I have, is making sure that we're making appropriate progress for those students.
I'm going to ask another one, and then I have 6, so I'll spread mine out. And then if there's a patron that wants to come down, we can allow that, or you come on down. If not, I'll just keep going. So the next question, Dr. Fagan. Why do you think parts of the Douglas County community believe you used divisive methods to implement policy?
Well, I mean, I can't speak for anybody in Douglas County. What I can tell you is that there is a great division in the Douglas County community. There's very strong political groups on either side of several issues, whether it be choice for students, including scholarships/vouchers. Pay for performance is another one. The fact that the Board of Education, that's what's called in Colorado, allowed the collective bargaining agreement with the American Federation of Teachers, the union, to expire in 2012. After 100 hours of open negotiation with no movement, they just allowed it to expire. That was a very controversial and divisive issue in the community. And I think that sometimes misinformation goes around, and people, they act based on what they know. And so I think sometimes people misunderstand policy level fights being a superintendent kind of piece of work, when in the reality is, superintendents, they work for a board. And when a board moves forward and comes to a superintendent like me and says, hey, we're thinking that we would like to do what our subcommittee recommended, and we would like to do a scholarship/voucher program, it's my responsibility at that point to have a conversation with the board, an honest conversation about the pros and cons of that idea. But at the end of the day, the board gets to decide what their policy will be. And I remember very well going to the Colorado Department of Education in a January day and sitting down with them and saying, the Douglas County Board is interested in doing this and would like to know if this is possible, if you would allow the funding of these scholarships to these students. And the Colorado Department of Education said, yes, we will, and this is how you need to do it. And so I went back and I provided that information in good faith, and the board decided to move forward with that. And there were definitely political divides as a result of some of their policy decisions. But they were very committed to the things that they had run on in 2009, and we're going to move forward with those because they were what a majority, in their view of the community, wanted to see happen in that school district. So there was definitely differences of opinion on those things, and they became quite fierce over time. But I think that sometimes we just need to make sure that we understand the role of the superintendent versus the policy level direction of a board and the unique context of a different community.
Dr. Fagan, I'd like to start by just saying welcome. Texas is a much different climate than Austin and Iowa, so hopefully you're enjoying it. Thank you for being here, and thank you for the opportunity to do it. I have a leadership question. You talked about leadership a lot in your earlier remarks. And as a fellow leader and someone who loves the arts, I'd love to get your perspective as it relates to the district and to the new job of what you feel like are some of the items that you're hearing or sensing or feeling that you think we should start, stop, or continue in order for improvement. And then in terms of the second level question along that line, I'd love to get your philosophy on conflict resolution and how you address conflict.
Great. So start, stop, and continue, maybe, I think was the third area. So I will tell you that I'm working really hard to learn all of the uniqueness that is Humble and having those conversations with people throughout the district, but I've only been here for 3 weeks. And so I feel like it's really early for me to say, these are the things that we're doing well, these are the things we're not doing well, and these are the things we should continue. But I understand that, after 100 or so days, that's a good thing for me to come back and share with everyone, is what I've learned. Right now, what I'm trying to really do is understand deeply the dynamics of everything from individual schools to district issues as a whole. And I think we're making a lot of good progress I've had probably some of the more in-depth conversations and briefings on the capital pieces of things, because that's moving quickly. We're a growing district, you all know that, and we need more space. And we're building an elementary school, we're gonna build a middle school, we're gonna build an elementary school, and we have all of this planned out. We're actually having a facility study done right now, which I think is fantastic, and one of the things that was music to my ears, because in a growing district, I think it's very important for us to have a comprehensive view of every school, not just the ones we need to build, but the ones that we still have, that children are in every day, and making sure that we're providing a quality environment across the board to all students, and so that we can educate our community about what our needs are going to be in the future, what they are right now, where we see ourselves going. I think this facility study is going to be very instructive and helpful for all of us to understand better what this next probably 10-year period looks like. So I think that's going really well. I feel like we need to have, I know so little about the amount of testing, but I hear a lot about that. I hear parents, I hear teachers, I hear others talk about too much testing. I've heard students say too much testing. So I don't know enough about that, only enough to be dangerous, and I wouldn't want to make any kind of an editorial comment about it, but it's clearly something we need to discuss more and figure out what our position is. There are things starting to pop up from the legislature that they are going to talk about in this session, some pretty interesting things. And I think funding is one that we all need to be on the same page with and talk about and encourage legislators down the right path, because we shouldn't have to pick between electives, class sizes. These are things that all children should have. They should be able to go to the arts, they should have music, they should have athletics, they should have activities, they should have low class sizes, they should have all of those things, and we need to continue to move forward in the funding conversation as we're moving into a legislative session. So those are some of the things that are on the sort of front burner. Another one is, you may or may not know, but Texas came forward with a new teacher evaluation system, and so there is some work to do on that piece. Like I said, I have a copy of them. I'm in the process. I know that there are some districts that have been working on those, and where they've been used as a growth tool for teachers, they've been seen as perhaps a positive, but they're a lot of work for everyone, and so it's about figuring out what that should look like and how can it be managed by everyone. We certainly don't want to take more time evaluating than we are teaching. We want to make sure that there's good balance and that what we're asking teachers to do is fair, and leaders as well, because sometimes it can be overwhelming what the state's requiring of leaders. So those are some things that have popped up early in my conversations that I feel pretty comfortable talking about. I haven't come across anything that I said, we need to stop doing that. You know, I just haven't come across anything like that. I have questions about things, but I want to remain in my I don't know space until I feel like I have more information about those things. And I think there are many things that we're doing very well. And that's just based on, again, very preliminary data that I need to understand more. I couldn't really tell you about our schools until I've had a chance to walk through them and be in classrooms and visit with teachers and visit with students and visit with parents. And I've done that for a handful of schools, but that's not nearly enough. And being in a school on a day like today doesn't tell me about what it looks like, feels like, smells like, you know, any of those things for a student who's learning. Now, I did have an opportunity to visit with a few students today, and they gave me their glimpse into the school, but I also like the opportunity to walk around and feel it myself. So without those experiences, I feel like my data set is a bit empty, and I just really want more opportunity. Now, you have to remind me what your second question was. Conflict management. So in my view, conflict management, I don't have a sort of formulaic approach, but I will tell you that, you know, good work is built on relationships, and relationships are foundational for moving forward through difficult circumstances. And so the first thing I would say about conflict is I hope that we have built relationships and foundations that we can act on. But from there, it's making sure, in my opinion, everybody has good information, good and right information. And there's a little bit of the, for me, the seek to understand before being understood, really understanding all points of view. And then from there, it's about figuring out what the win-win position is going forward. And that's been my position. I was a high school principal in 1999. Since then, I've been in leadership positions in education, and I've always worked to help everybody feel, to the extent possible, that they left the situation not completely on one side or the other, but that they were heard, that it was a fair resolution, that they got some of what they were coming for, they were listened to fairly, all of those kind of things. And I think that that's the way that you work through conflict. I try to be very objective and fair. That's really kind of part of my soul. And you know, right versus wrong, I think that was really part of my upbringing and something that's really important to me. So at the same time, I will tell you, there are certain levels that I just won't engage. I will, for 6 years, I've been through some very difficult situations, and I've never lowered myself to a level that I felt ashamed in the morning of what I said or what I did or how I reacted. And I can't speak for other people. I can't make decisions for them. I can only control myself. And so I choose to remain at a certain level of professionalism, and I'm going to stay in that space.
I think many of us were introduced to negative comments through social media, and I guess I'm more interested in what you've learned through the time, particularly in Colorado. What did you take from that experience?
What did I learn from my time in Colorado? Well, I learned a lot of things, some of which I probably wouldn't, publicly share because it would come off as negative toward other people. But I've really, being in Colorado and some of the things that you read about, et cetera, really reaffirmed my position of some of the things I just mentioned, that you can only control yourself, and that you have to decide how you're going to approach something, and even if people are going to do certain things to you, are you going to do them back? And your own level of courage to carry forward in what you believe is best, what you believe is your professional responsibility, and some of the most difficult circumstances. And so, I think I've learned a lot about my family and the importance of my family in my life, and what the kind of experience I want my daughters to have in the community I want them to grow up in, the values that I think are important for us to live and work in. I also think that, I really learned a lot about the role of the superintendent and the challenges of communication in this day and age, because I think that sometimes communication's easier than it's ever been, but I think that misinformation is easier to spread today than ever before, and it's very difficult to pull back in. Something really exciting flies really fast through the atmosphere, even if it's not true. And so that's a challenge in education that we face today that I don't really feel like we faced 10 years ago, of making sure that we're doing a good job of building relationships and having communications and connections that are built on trust, so that if something is spread all over the place in a surprising way, that you can reach out to people and say, let me give you the facts, I've always done that before, I'll always do that going forward, so you can trust this. And I think that we really have to make sure today that we don't depend just on email, just on Twitter, just on you fill in the blank. We have to have something more than that, and in large districts, that's a bigger challenge than in small districts where everybody kind of knows everybody, and it's a challenge we have to rise to. So I think that is one of the biggest takeaways I've had. I also learned in Colorado that, perseverance through the legislative process can ultimately reveal a positive result, that it's not an overnight experience, but that if you continue to work together and build a coalition for what's right and what's good, that you can move the needle over time, but you have to be patient, you have to persevere, even when you go in thinking, we're gonna have this great bill and everything's gonna be solved, and what you end up with is a committee to study it. And you could be disappointed in that and kind of like, well, it's never gonna work out, but then you go back the next time, and a whole lot of things change. And so, perseverance is very important, patience is important, that personalized piece, working together with people that you've built relationships with.
I'm up to 12 questions now, so I'm going to try to balance this out because I truly want to try to get every question in. So I'm going to do a question. I'll let come up and do that, but I do feel like I need to roll off 3 or 4 so I can try to make some progress there. And I will say this as we continue to come in, if we run out of time, I will prioritize the questions that I get from here on out, meaning that in the order that they come in, I'm gonna ask those questions. So if I get to a question at the end and it was not answered or didn't have time to ask, it's not because I sorted them. It's just that's the way I received it, okay? So here's my next question, Dr. Fagan. Do you have any plans to address the student growth and population by adjusting attendance zones, specifically underutilization at Humble High School and overcrowding at Atascocita? Will the new high school take some of the Atascocita zone?
So as far as that goes, I have not attended a boundary committee meeting, and so I'm not as familiar with that work yet. So I wouldn't want to get ahead of everybody and attempt to answer that, but I know that there is a committee that constantly is studying, working on these questions, and hopes to provide a pretty significant update going forward where people can really kind of see the plans ahead and what's going to be necessary. Because when you do open a new high school, you are going to have different attendance zones. That's just the way that it works. So, but I know there is a committee. I know they're working on that. As we have more information, we'll be working to get that out to everyone.
My question goes along with that, with the issue of growth in the district. We have some campuses that are overcrowded. And we do have a policy in the district where we have to allow some towns to do an intra-campus transfer. If a principal said, I'm sorry, but we're full, what would be your stance on allowing transfers into that campus to continue or not continue?
So in general, my policy works like this. So I'm always interested in meeting the needs of the student who's requesting. However, it's a little bit like a lot of other issues where you have to balance that against the needs of the many who are there. And so I've always found it completely reasonable if planning documents clearly show the capacity of a building and a principal has accepted up to or even slightly over that capacity, for that principal then to say, I'm sorry, but I don't have any more space, but I'm happy to put you on a wait list, and if there is a space available, you'd be the first person I would call. And in my previous districts, that's been the case. We've had to do that sometimes because of magnet programs in a particular school, sometimes because it's just a new building. There's a whole lot of different reasons, but we always are working with schools that are under occupied to really showcase the exciting things they do for students in hopes that we can, encourage people who may be unsure where their student should go to consider that school, and I think we can do some of those things too. So it's a two-way kind of work, in my opinion, to work on the underutilized, the excess capacity pieces, and also to make sure that we're doing a good job supporting leaders and managing overcapacity.
Thank you. And I also want to welcome you.
Thank you.
I have another question. The dismissal for good cause part of your contract is nearly verbatim when compared to the previous superintendent contract in Humboldt ISD. There were only two things omitted. One of those is dismissal for failure to achieve a good rapport with parents, community, staff, or the board. In light of the negative information we've received from Douglas County, this is quite concerning. Why was this omitted as a reason for dismissal? And if you don't know, can a board member please answer?
So I actually don't know that part. I assumed that the contract language in that section is boilerplate. Usually every state sort of has their boilerplate language on those, what's okay in the state of Texas or what's okay in the state of Colorado or what's okay in the state of Arizona to be considered cause. And from time to time the law changes on that and then they just adjust the contracts. But my guess is if you go to the TASB website and you look at the draft sort of boilerplate superintendent contracts, generally speaking, and I didn't request any change to that section, generally speaking, it's just the exact same thing in every superintendent's contract according to what's allowed by the law. So I don't know anything beyond that.
Can I ask a question back here?
No, ma'am.
And she has a
Next,
baby, though.
since the last town hall meeting, evidence has surfaced from Douglas County open records requests showing that a teacher turnover rates are quite misleading due to the way they were calculated by the district. Please explain how the turnover rates you cited at the last town hall were calculated and why that method was chosen. And I do apologize for the abruptness. If you do want to speak, just please get a card or please come up to the microphone. I'm sorry if I appeared rude. I do apologize. Dr. Fagan, thank you.
So there are multiple different ways that turnover rates are calculated in Colorado. And so the Colorado Department of Education calculates turnover rates from January to December, which doesn't really make a lot of sense because the school year doesn't run from January till December. And the other thing that the Colorado Department of Education has done historically is, just for ease, anybody who changes job codes is considered turnover. And in Douglas County is one of the highest percentage of promoted staff on the Front Range, meaning the district hires its own staff to become assistant principals, to become lead teachers, to become principals, to work in as curriculum coordinators. And so, because the Department of Ed counts all those people as turnover, if you look at the state information, first of all, you're going to see January to December, and second of all, you're going to see every promotion counted as turnover. And I think the number of promotion last year was about 7%. So when you take the number and subtract 7%, you're going to see a number that's really low as far as turnover goes on the Front Range of Colorado. Now, why is the district information different? See, this is, again, the misinformation piece. The district doesn't calculate turnover from January to December because that doesn't make sense. Because in education, hiring seasons go from spring through September, August, September. And so in the past, the board has requested that Human Resources in Douglas County give a more accurate picture and portrayal of the turnover circumstances. And so the figures will not match the state figures. That's just the facts, because they're using a different calendar and a different methodology. The Human Resources Department in Douglas County actually uses the actual hiring season, and then they show regrettable versus unregrettable, and they go through all the reasons why somebody leaves, because they want to make sure that the board understands if somebody's retiring or if they're moving out of state or they're having a baby and staying home, that those are not controllable turnovers, and we can't change that. But they want them to also see the folks that did leave that we consider really positive. And so the numbers I cited last time were to illustrate what was really going on, and that was that in the district last year, and these are round numbers, but the district retained 95% of their highly effective teachers, 90% of their effective teachers, about 65% of their partially effective teachers, and none of their ineffective teachers. And about 90% of the teachers in the district are either effective or highly effective. So the bulk are in those top two categories. Still, when you turn over 100% of your ineffective category and 35% of your partially effective category, you are going to turn over, there is going to be turnover data. But the reality is some of those folks weren't the best fit for students in the classroom. Some of them chose to go, some of them didn't choose to go, but they were probationary. So all of those data are going to depend on the context. So you can't compare all of the pieces, but the information is absolutely accurate that is posted. You just have to know the reference point.
Come on up, yes, yes, ma'am.
Well, first of all, thank you, and I want to welcome you to Humble. I know it's hard coming to a new district and not exactly having the red carpet laid out for you, but I think that just shows what kind of district and what kind of parents we have and how we are all very interested in our children's education. That's why we're here. So thank you for giving us this time. Now, just like every parent, we all did our research and we were looking online and all that, but I actually came upon an article, and you might not remember, it was back in 2012 with Ed Weekly, a conversation you had. And I just want to read, you mentioned this to kind of see if this is the same mindset that you have. Change is hard if all your metrics are implying that everything is great. But I think it's incumbent on our school districts, or on school districts like Douglas County, to lead the way, to try things, and to be partners with urban districts in saying, we're going to pilot this, and we'll let you know how it goes. And we'll help you if you want to do it, and vice versa. Do you feel that way coming here, that a lot of the, I guess, not accepting change sometimes comes with the fact that we are such a high-performing district and parents feel, well, everything's great, someone's going to come and try to change everything. Do you feel that that's the situation here? And are you coming kind of with that same idea, let's try innovative new things because we do want to be leaders in education? And if so, I know you mentioned, well, you're still kind of getting the feel for things, but what kind of innovative ideas do you plan on bringing, similar to performance-based assessments or school choice programs like you did in Colorado, or different things?
Right. So, okay. So to answer the first part of that question, so Douglas County is very affluent district. It's, I believe, the 6th wealthiest county in the country. And the position by many in that district is, if you're given much, then much is expected from you. and that yes, change is difficult. However, the students in Douglas County were doing really well on standardized tests, so that wasn't a high bar for them, and it wasn't a high bar for the district. And so the conversation that we were having was, we could just stay, well, where we were, because we were outperforming, we were doing great on standardized tests. So we could just stay there and say, we're doing great, you're lucky to be here. Or we could start to move forward in the best interest of students, because we know those tests are a very low bar. We know they don't measure the most important things we do in education. We know that we need to move forward in our thinking on some of our targets and the way that we assess and not test. There were a lot of pieces that many of us agreed needed to move forward. The change is hard part was when the Colorado Department of Ed wanted to be a race to the top state and decided to implement Senate Bill 191 and the Common Core and all these things all at once. And they pushed those into districts. So when you have a district that's working on some pretty good things for kids, but all of a sudden you have these other pieces come in, that's really hard. And so we tried to marry those things together. And I still think it was the right approach, because we tried to make sure that the teacher evaluation instrument that was required by the state was measuring the things that the teacher said were best for kids. But at the same time, the timeline was really fast and probably not appropriate that the state handed down. And so we wanted to continue to be a leader. One of the things in Colorado is there's tons of rural districts, and they would say to us, we can't afford to build our own curriculum. We don't have the staff, we don't have the resources. And so what we would do is say, well, we're going to work with hundreds of teachers in our district, we're going to build one, and we'll post it online, and you can have it. Because we want your students to have that too. The same was true of buildings and grounds departments. We had a planning department, a construction department, they had none of that. So we wanted to collaborate, we wanted to lead, we felt like we had a lot of gifts as a district, and so we wanted to move forward in the best interest of students and lend what we could to other districts that wanted to do that same work. And yeah, change was very difficult, particularly during a recession, which is what we were just dealing with in that piece right there. And so the other half of your question was, I know people think, well, she must be coming in with a list of her favorite things that every school district needs. And the reality is I don't have a list of my favorite things that every school district needs. That's just not the way I see superintendent leadership. I see superintendent leadership more like this. You come in and you learn a district well, and you find out where the staff, the students, the parents, the community, the business community, where they all want to go, and then you apply your expertise to that goal and that path forward. So that's what I believe is the right thing. I'm not a person who comes in with a list of policies or ideas or programs and says, okay, I'm here, everybody's doing X. And if you look back over my history, you'll see that my work has been specifically linked or sort of contextualized to where I was. So like I mentioned in Tucson, we were working to end a federal desegregation order. That work looks really different. We're not going to do that here. That would make no sense. And in Des Moines, we were working on, there was an issue with kids leaving the district to go out. We were surrounded by suburban districts, open enrollment's really pervasive in Iowa. We didn't want to have that sort of flight out of the district. We wanted to have kids actually want to come into the district. So we built programs that other districts couldn't afford to build and provided opportunities to kids that they couldn't provide as both a service, but also as an incentive to keep the district having kids in it, kids wanting to be there. So every district has been different. And it's not about coming in with, I'm not a policy wonk or any of those I don't have a certain, ideology that I want to infuse into school districts. That's just not who I am. I'm a teacher, I'm a parent. I want the best for my kids and the best for everybody else's kids. I want to see every classroom in the district a classroom I would put my little girls in. I want to make sure that I'm connected with people all over the place so that we all are working together, because I don't believe one person can move a district forward. It has to be all of us. And without that, it won't happen. So I hope that answers your question a little bit.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I want to come back up here really quick. With our specific district, we have a dual language program, and it's very small. My child is in the dual language program, and I just had any thoughts as far as expanding it maybe to the middle school level, or is it anywhere near, just to see if that's something that's going to grow based on its success and how much need there is really here.
Yeah, there's actually quite a lot of people who have brought that up to me as something that's really important to them to have that conversation about. So it's definitely on the radar. Great. Thank you.
Okay, it's back to me.
Okay.
Can you clarify the aggressive treatment Grace Davis received for planning a protest about teacher treatment / turnover?
So that's a really long, complicated story, but for those of you that aren't familiar with it, there was a student who was planning a student protest. She was planning the protest over one of her teachers who had resigned to go and work in a neighboring school district and be the volleyball coach there. And I reached out to her and encouraged her to, I said, you know, in our district, we have a lot of opportunities for students to have their concerns heard so that we can work together with you to make sure you have good information and resolve your concerns. And she didn't want to do that. And she said she would be happy to meet with me after the protest, but not before. And so that was fine, and that's where that ended. In the meantime, she put out a press release, and she put out a petition and various other things. And the board president reached out to her via the phone number she put on the petition, or the press release, one or the other. And the board president reached out to her because a lot of her concerns that she listed were policy level concerns that were linked to the board. And so Grace agreed to meet with the board president. They set up the meeting, the two of them, and the board president's name was Megan. And Megan and Grace met at Grace's high school at the time Grace chose in a conference or whatever. And Grace recorded the meeting. And after the fact, there was quite a blow up about it in the community about Grace's perception of the way that, and the board president brought the vice president along, and the vice president lives in that community of that high school and has children who are friends with kids in that high school, so she brought her along. And so there was quite a discussion about what occurred there. After that meeting, I met with Grace. We had a very good meeting. There was no issue with it whatsoever. We moved forward in a very positive way together. In the meantime, though, the board continued to have disagreements about it and decided to call for an investigation of the whole situation. So an investigator was hired who did a full investigation. Every single person who was at all related to the meeting, etc., went and met with the investigator and was questioned and whatever. And then the report has been released. I'm sure you can read it online if you'd like. But nonetheless, what the investigator found was that the board members who met with Grace actually didn't break any policies. They didn't do anything wrong, if you will. You know, he said that, these are my words, not his, but basically he said that maybe some of the things they said weren't the best, they weren't presented in the best way, but that he didn't feel that there was anything, you know, any malfeasance, et cetera, in the meeting. So I wasn't there for the board meeting when they actually brought that forward and discussed it as a board, but the Douglas County board meetings are online if you'd like to look at it. And I'm not sure what the ultimate resolution was there, but that's the investigation really found that the board members who met with her didn't really engage in any abusive behavior. They may have said things that they shouldn't and stuff, but that was kind of the moral of the story.
Okay, in Douglas County, there was a loan for about $600,000 for a school designed to meet the needs of K-8 special education students. Currently, the creation of the campus is on hold due to concerns with segregation and discrimination. Humble has cluster programming on various campuses. Did you support the design in Douglas County for the proposal of that campus, and would you support that concept in Humble ISD? So
again, this is just a piece of the story. The whole story is that in Douglas County there is a place called Plum Creek Academy, which is a very successful opportunity for parents and students of special needs students who choose to go to Plum Creek Academy. Students are afforded really wraparound care services with the goal of them going back to their home high school and being successful. A very high percentage of the students, these are high school students that go to Plum Creek Academy for a short period of time, end up going back to their high schools and are successful. Again, it's an IEP team decision, including parents, to determine if a child is going to leave their home high school and go to Plum Creek Academy. For small children in Douglas County, 5, 6, 7-year-olds who are experiencing very discrepant behaviors from their peers, probably less than 0.1% of the students in the district, there are no options like that in the district. So what happens is if the team, the IEP team, does decide that that child cannot be successful in their home elementary or middle school, then what Douglas County does is contract with schools in Denver that support those students. And some of those programs are $100,000 a year, and they require the students to ride on the bus for an hour in the morning, an hour in the afternoon. So they're very expensive. The students are not in the district. Frankly, the district feels like perhaps the programs aren't the level that they would like them to be. So the personalized learning officer for the district, who is an absolute champion for all kids, and the former principal of Plum Creek Academy, came forward to the board quite a few years ago and said, we have little kids, 5-year-old kids, 6-year-old kids who are really struggling, and we're calling their parents every day, and their parents are worried about being fired from their jobs, and on and on and on, these really, really challenging situations. And he said, I don't feel good about the fact that we don't have a place for these students. And by the way, Douglas County is a district that's 900 square miles, it's 80 schools, 67,000 students that will double in size by 2040. So in 2040, they'll have 125,000 students and instead of 9 high schools in their feeders, 18 high schools in their feeders. And his point was, we need to prepare so that we can take care of these children now and into the future. So he requested that the board consider a Plum Creek Academy-like opportunity available to families who choose it in Douglas County. And the board agreed and set aside the funding to do it. And they were working with a building. It's a long story. The zoning of all that didn't work out. So the whole program was put on hold because of a lack of a facility. But the board has stood committed to making sure that within the Douglas County School District, there is a continuum of care provided to all children in an attempt to meet the needs of 100% of the students in the district. And so that's the situation with that school. Did I support that work? Absolutely. I sat across the table from some of these parents who are desperate for something that will work to support their child who is not being successful. They're desperate, and they deserve something in the district that can meet their needs. And that district is large enough that they could provide that within the context of that county. And it doesn't exist today. So that's the reality of that program. It was put out on social media as if we were going to scoop up all these children against their parents' will and put them in a segregated school. And that's just simply not the case. Plum Creek Academy is celebrated by the parents and children who attend there, who have been successful there, who go back to their home high schools and are successful in the future once they are through their period of crisis. It's a great opportunity for those kids. It's proven itself a successful model. Kids are constantly trying to get in from outside the district. And so it was a very unfair representation of what Dr. Germain was attempting to move forward for the youngest students in the district.
What's the district's plan to address Senate Bill 4, tax credits for special needs and low-income families?
So we have not discussed that. It's my understanding that there's no interest in supporting that here, and that then therefore we would be going to talk with legislators, et cetera, and work together with other districts who share our position. But like I said, it's really early in the legislative piece and haven't had an opportunity to have those conversations with the board or others, so I wouldn't want to say anything more than that.
Would you share your perception of the Supreme Court case out of Douglas County regarding the child with autism and why the district was not able to resolve the parents' concerns at a local level?
I don't know if I'm familiar with that enough to discuss the details, and in addition to that, I probably wouldn't. I have a general Liz's policy against talking about individual staff members or individual children in large audiences, and so I probably wouldn't talk about it anyway, but if somebody wants to sit down and have a conversation about that at a policy level, would probably be okay to do that.
As a district of innovation, would the district still follow TEA requirements for the cameras in special education classrooms?
Well, we have to, there's certain things that you can't get, my general policy is that we're always going to follow the law, we're always going to follow the policies, and then we're going to do what's best for children within the space that we have within that. And so if we're required to have the cameras, then we're required to have the cameras. And generally when there's something that that we don't feel is right, which I know there are a lot of questions about this, we need to work to change it, and we need to work to make it better. Sometimes things have good intentions and go the wrong direction. I see that all the time with legislation. So then it's about going back to those people. I was sitting on the stage at a school next to Senator Scheffel, and he's from Douglas County. He was majority leader last year, and I leaned over to him and said, I need to talk to you about the READ Act. We were at a thing that was just getting over, and he looked at me and he said, oh yeah, I sponsored that bill. And I said, oh. And I went ahead and told him that it wasn't working, that we were testing little kids who demonstrated proficiency the first time 3 and 4 times a year because the READ Act required us to. They were wasting money, wasting instructional time, hurting kids, and probably wasn't exactly what he wanted to hear, but when at the end of the day he said, well, that wasn't what I intended. That's not what I wanted. And so we worked to do modifications to the READ Act in Colorado to make sense for kids. And a year later, you don't have to test kids who are proficient 3 times. Once they've demonstrated proficiency at a certain level, that's good. We're good. We don't have to do it 2 and 3 more times. And we also don't have to test kids that we know are not going to pass, kids who are new to the country and don't speak English. It makes no sense to put a READ Act test in front of them. So there were modifications that we made. And again, Senator Scheffel, he did that with his heart in the right space. But what came of it when the rules got made and all this and that wasn't what he expected, and he worked with us to change it. So that's my experience.
I just want to clarify, are we allowed to ask one question tonight or one at a time?
One at a time.
One at a time. Okay. I asked more questions. I met with you many times before,
Yeah.
your town hall. I've offered to ask a question for a parent that's not here. But I wanted to go back to the Grace Davis question because that's something I'm really passionate about. I read and researched, and I think the ruling came that the team that investigated said that they did not break any rules because technically it wasn't written that administration was not allowed to meet with staff without parents' approval.
Board members.
Board members, yeah,
Right.
that's correct. So it was probably good practice for them to get parents' permission, but it wasn't in policy because they just, from what I understand, it was so absurd that nobody thought that that would have happened. So are you familiar with the rules regarding that in our district? And if you are, if you're not, what would you do to ensure that our students are being pulled aside for a couple hours and investigated by administration without our permission?
So it wasn't administration. The administration was when the principal, the director of high schools, and the assistant superintendent, who were all involved, had daily conversations with Mr. Davis. So there was lots of communication between the administration and the family. The breakdown was that the president of the board, who reached out to Grace via the phone number on the press release, had assumed that Grace had shared, when she accepted the invitation to meet with Megan, because she told me she didn't want to meet, when she accepted the invitation to meet with Megan, Megan was under the impression, right or wrong, that Grace had let her family know because Grace picked the time and the place and everything. No member of the staff went down and got her from the room or anything. She came down on her own and met with them, all of that. So in any case, I think in Douglas County in the past, there have been a lot of board members visit schools a lot there, and they talk with students when they're in schools. There were board members outside the school the day of that event who talked with students who didn't have parent permission. That was all in the investigation report, that basically it was sort of a long-standing practice in the district that board members were allowed, if for lack of a better word, to speak with students. And so I know that there are other board members there who want to explore policies that would eliminate board members' abilities to talk with students. So I think that any board can discuss what parameters they want to put on that. There, it was very common for board members to interact with students. They even had a student advisory committee that was very successful. They had a student that sat on the dais at board meetings. So it was just a different circumstance. But yeah, it's unfortunate that the communication didn't happen between Megan and Mr. Davis or Mrs. Davis. Mrs. Davis was at the meeting that I had with Grace. She was right there. So they were very involved with the administration part of it.
In our district in the future?
Well, I don't know what the policy is as we stand here, so I can't really speak to that, but that's a board's decision whether or not they want to encourage or limit board interaction with students. It's a very difficult thing if you want a board that's going to graduations, and, you have to really be clear about that. And even the investigator, who's an attorney, said that a policy like that, if pursued in Douglas County, would be very difficult to enforce and very difficult to monitor how they wanted to, because what's okay and what's not okay, and how are we going to create clear lines and parameters. But, it's something any board could venture into and try to figure out.
Okay, and a question from the parent that they asked me. Was Dr. Fagan, and I'm going to read verbatim, so you have said in previous meetings that if you were against something that the school board or the state legislature wanted to implement, but you had community support, you would help try to fight against it or change that policy. Considering the typical involvement with parents in the community from your past districts, what percentage of or what number does the community need to reach in order for you to feel the community is behind your position?
I don't know as though I'd have a number. I don't think it's as black and white or cut and dry as that. I think that what you want to do as a leader is reach out to principals who have connections with communities, staff. There's a teacher advisory here. All of those people have connections in the community, and you work together to figure out what the sort of saturation point is on any given topic. The difference here, in my opinion, is that when I interviewed with this board, I asked them very directly if they had certain things that they were planning on implementing next fall, or that they wanted to see done, or some really out there policies. And I jokingly said, these are questions I should have asked last time. But the truth is, I really wanted to know. And, they said absolutely not. So I feel like a little bit that we're kind of getting into guarding against a board, the Douglas County board, that doesn't exist here. And they were very transparent there about exactly what they were going to do and how they were going to do it. It was not a surprise to anyone when it moved forward as it did, because there were committees and there were subgroups and there was all kinds of work going on. And it was well known that not everybody agreed to the things that were happening, but that there was a wide agreement that the majority were behind it. And that was their decision at a policy level. And there were a lot of people that voted. In 2009, the board members that ran said, this is what we're going to do, this is what we believe in, pay for performance, empowering parents through choice, and they wanted to kind of a new day in assessment, if you will. I don't have a better word for it than that. And that group of board members won 65-35, and they believed, based on those numbers, that a large portion of the Douglas County community was behind those items and they were moving forward with them. So it's a different context, and so I want to make sure that we're not pretending like we have a board that we don't have, or we're looking at initiatives that we're not looking at. Because when I interviewed with this board, I was very specific about asking those questions. There was no interest at all in vouchers. There was no interest at all in being Douglas County or any of the Douglas County things. The interest that we have in common is moving forward together with great teachers and great leaders and with parents, and doing good things for kids so that all kids can be successful. And that's what we all had in common. That's what we're working on together.
My name is Sebastian Harris. I'm a resident of this district since 2003. We have a very passionate board meeting where a variety of us agree with and support this. One of the things that does concern me is, I don't know if you know really the fight that's coming in this state with our current lieutenant governor. This is serious. You bring up quite a few things, but you say you're not quite sure about this, you're not quite sure about that, and I understand. This is your third job. But as a parent, putting aside everything else, that does concern me a little bit. This legislative session is going to be a battle. I swear. Okay? So, I would like to feel more comfortable with what you're going to do to get yourself up to speed on that quickly. Okay? I mean, this is a school district where we all, or most of us, voted to put a lot of money into here, and the state legislature came and said, you can't have a rate that high. Most of the people here didn't want that. We wanted our schools. This is our community fabric, right? So we very much value that. But it was shoved down our throat. More of that's going to come. Sconzo, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but some of the things he's done is we follow the letter of the law but not necessarily the spirit. So we do what's right for our students. We're not trying to make political statements. Worrying about your children, my children. Right? So if you can make me feel a little bit more comfortable about that, I would appreciate that.
And I have a question that's like right in there that's got
Okay.
some specifics, so let me ask it and you can knock them both out. It says, I and many fellow parents are concerned about plans advancing in the legislative which would take funding away from public schools and give for profit or private schools, which are exempt from many of the protections our children have. What recommendations do you have for parents who want to let our legislators know we want our tax dollars to stay with public schools?
So both of those kind of similar. So first of all, I think we all know here that I'm just one person. And so 1,200 school districts, 1,200 superintendents. So it's not going to depend just on what I do, but what I can tell you is that it's my understanding from working with former superintendents in Texas that were part of the search and that I've met through different things. And I will meet actual superintendents in Texas. I think next week I have a meeting, Region 4. But nonetheless, in talking with those people, they have said, you know, superintendents in Texas are united working against, you know, the kind of choice things that would take money out of public schools and put it in private, working against lowering funding or not funding, all of those things. So it's my experience that it's not one person that you all need, although you certainly want your person in there, but it's got to be a united front. And so the other question was, what can parents do? I'll tell you that the legislators expect superintendents to show up and say, don't take our money away. They expect that. It doesn't carry as much weight in that particular piece of legislation as parents, community members, voters, sending an email, sending a letter, making a phone call, whatever you can do, doing a tweet, saying, I want to be really clear, I voted for you and this is how I feel about this. There's nothing more powerful when I go down to the Capitol as sitting down and I'm doing my superintendent thing, which they expect, but when you all have done it too, they actually say, oh, I got a lot of phone calls from your district about this. And that has a huge impact. So yes, Liz will be down there, saber rattling, all that stuff. But it's equally, if not more important, that you and all your friends send that email, make that call, because I'll tell you, you know, when they get 100 calls on a topic, they're like, whoa, that is a big deal. And it's not that difficult for 100 parents to pick up the phone and call. And so I will just tell you, if it is the battle you say it is, and by the way, they always say, we're going to do this, you know, but maybe, you never know. But having gone through a few of these, it's always important to make sure that you tell your people that you voted for up front how you feel on some of these issues. Because the more emails they get, the easier the work is for superintendents and others who go down there, and board members who go down there, to say, I know you got a few calls from my district. Yeah, I sure did. That's really powerful. So take the time. I know people go, well, I'm just one person. But you're one person, and another person, and another person, and pretty soon you have 100 phone calls, and that's a big deal. So make those calls, and I mean, they can be nice. You know, just, hey, I heard this is going on, and I'm sure you won't support it, Fred, but I just wanted to let you know. This is how I feel about that.
Next question. It's my understanding that according to your contract, you own all rights to any intellectual property you develop during your tenure. Does that mean Humble ISD will have to pay a licensing fee to continue to use it after your tenure is done?
No, that's a common thing in contracts. It was in my last contract in Douglas County, and it actually never applied to anything. It's sort of under the idea that someday, you know, we all aspire to write a book, or at least a lot of us aspire to write a book. Like, someday I'm going to write a book about that. And it just gives people like me the opportunity someday to write a book and say, you know, something or other about education, if we ever want to. You know, when you write your doctorate and you're doing your dissertation, at least at Drake University, they're like, now we hope that someday you're going to publish. You know, this is something we'd like to see happen. And, you know, we're busy people. We're doing real work every day for our own kids and for our district kids. And it's just, you know how life is, and so it hardly ever gets done. But it's commonplace to have that in superintendent contracts, to basically just say, you have the right and the ability, if you write something, that you can use it. So it's not, it doesn't mean anything beyond that. People are reading into that, I think. It was confusing in Douglas County too, and I know people there have said that, but we did a lot of work together in Douglas County. You know, we built curriculum, we built assessments. I don't own any of that. I mean, that's not what it's about.
Hello again.
Hello.
I'm Scott Ford. I think we've met virtually before. I want to tag on to what you just said about newsroom content. When I worked for Humble ISD, I was very careful to make sure any of the content that I developed that I speak on now at state, national levels, and I publish myself was on my own laptop, was on my own time, outside of Humble ISD, because the policies are, please correct me if I'm wrong, teachers, if you do these school computers at home, the district now, fair enough. Not my knowledge has I've enforced this. So my question is, I'm cool with keeping my opinion. I would like to see the same courtesy officially extended to all staff as well.
Well, it sounds like it has been in the past.
It has been. I mean, like I said, to Humble ISD's credit, they have never gone after somebody who's created something, which is a good thing. That it's not actually in the contract. It's not actually written out. And so boards change, leadership change. It would be just nice to see maybe going in the future, obviously for the school year, that's not the White House, but in future contracts, this same courtesy given to all teachers as well.
Fair point.
Okay, back to me again.
Okay.
Did you participate in private Meet the Superintendent meetings at school board members' houses ahead of the open forums? And if so, why was it by invite only, and how many board members were present in each meeting?
So I have offered to do, get-together groups with PTA groups, with different people that I've met in different circumstances, and so there were a handful of board members who invited people with concerns in their particular communities, and I answered their questions exactly like this, gave the same, only a much smaller version of who I am, and I think there was only one board member at any one of those events.
I read something about Humble having a teaching permit in place that allowed, I'm trying to read this correctly, permit in place via TEA allowing for CATE teachers to come from the field and not be certified, as well as a statement that class size waivers needed to be submitted after September 1st, and that waiver was submitted too early to be approved. If that is the case, why not resubmit the waiver application rather than go for the District of Innovation?
I wasn't aware that that was a possibility, so I've never heard that before. What I told you is exactly what Dr. Sconzo told me, which is what we have moved forward in the best interest of the district, and that was, thought we were going to go through the old process. Dr. Sconzo found out at the end of May that wasn't going to be possible. He moved forward on communicating with folks about the District of Innovation being the pathway forward and going through the committee requirements, et cetera, to move that forward so we could maintain our calendar and the other things that we have used waivers for in the past. So really it was nothing more than to continue business as usual. I'm not aware of any other extenuating or circumstance or opportunity to go another direction.
Okay. Although the District of Innovation allows Humble ISD a safety net to use an uncertified teacher to cover classes at CATE, what steps will the administration take to ensure that a teacher is prepared for all aspects of the job, including classroom management, discipline, curriculum coordination, and differentiation?
Well, I think that we all know that in each and every hire that we do as leaders, that's the case. I mean, you have to ensure, regardless of the person's certification, you have to make sure you provide opportunities early for them to, first of all, for you to understand their strengths and challenges, and number two, to then support them in fixing, if you will, or improving on some of those challenge areas. So that's the case with most hires. I know as a first-year teacher, I certainly required more helpful hints than I did as a third-year teacher. And so there are varying degrees of that go on, but principals and building leaders know from the very beginning that all of our teachers, all of our support staff are all of our responsibility to make sure that they're as successful as they possibly can be, regardless of if they're a Kate teacher or not a Kate teacher or whatever. So I think that that's just pretty standard across the board.
How can you make sure that diversity in staff is evident in our schools? I would like to see more diversity for my kids.
Well, that's a great question. I think that I haven't had a chance to talk with principals about that topic, but it's my experience that we always work to hire the very best person possible for our students, and we definitely want to make sure that our students have role models that are diverse so that they can look up to a variety of different people and know a variety of different people, because it is a global world. And so I think the principals really work hard to make sure that they're hiring the very best person for the job, considering all the attributes, all the needs of the position.
Okay, and I'll just keep going. Again, just a time check. We've got about 18 minutes before we would ask the last question. I've got 2, so we're making progress. All right, so this is kind of a repeat, but I do want to make sure that I ask every question. So, Kate teacher certification can be addressed without DOI. The district web page states that the district knows there are procedures. We can already hire Kate teachers without a degree and without certification. It is clear in Texas Education Code 21055 D-1. Why are we still exempting teacher certification when we can already do so for Kate teachers?
I'd have to look into that more. I don't know. I would assume that we're doing what we believe is required according to what the Department of Education has told us is required. So I'd have to look into if it's already allowed, then why they're requiring the District of Innovation status to do that. So that's another little piece of information that I don't have right here with me.
Franklin Wise. Karen, two beautiful colors. Maybe it's a difficult question. Under your administration, what changes will you make to prevent further felony assaults of our children?
Well, I'm not aware of a felony assault, so I would have to have more information about that.
Okay. To go along with this, under your administration, what changes will you make to prevent further continual criminal conspiracy cover-ups by this administration?
I'm not aware of any of those, but if you'd like to share additional information at another time, I'd be happy to hear.
Under your administration, what changes will you make to prevent further planting of drugs on economically disadvantaged children and or street kids by your organization?
Like I said, I've never heard of any of these things before, but from anyone. If you have specific information you'd like to share, I'd be happy to meet and talk about that. Great. Thank you.
I got another one.
Okay.
We all make mistakes and have to learn from them. What mistakes do you feel like you have learned from while in Douglas County?
Well, I talked earlier about the communication piece. I think that, I would consider myself to be an optimist. And I think that I always believe the best in people. And I think that sometimes I get surprised by things that maybe shouldn't be surprising. But with the way that misinformation was sort of spread through social media, I think I really learned the importance of proactive communication strategies that are based on trusting relationships, so that when interesting things are spread, people have avenues to use, to people that they can go to ask questions and get the right information, so that those kind of things are quieted quickly as appropriate. So I think that part of it was one of the biggest learning curves for me. The instructional leadership piece is really my passion and who I am, and I have a long history in that part of the world doing that work. And so I always learn and grow as a teacher and as a leader, all the time, every single day. And I taught professional development my entire time in Douglas County because I love that work. And every course I teach, I learn and I make it better the next time. The same is true for the way that you work to build capacity in leaders to lead their schools. And maybe you think you can jump from point A to point C and you find out, no, you've got to go much slower than that. So there are a lot of things that you learn as you go. But I think as far as specifically to Douglas County, probably the communication piece and the proactivity of quality communication being so critically important in a time when people worry about stuff that they read on social media, et cetera. So just being together and having a sort of a handshake deal that we'll all make sure that we're fact checking and looking at information and ensuring it's credible before moving it forward and making sure that I'm doing my part in that.
Question? Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
First, we do want to say welcome, and thank you for being here and allowing us this opportunity. You said part of your plan moving forward is to build relationships with parents. In particular, I'm here as a parent. Moving forward, how do you plan to do that? How do you recommend to us to get involved? Would that be through our local campuses, or is that something we're going to do more on a public forum like this?
So I think that multiple strategies are always the best as far as communication and collaboration with parents go. So I've been talking with different parent groups, everything from the PTA to other groups that exist in the district, about how can we build networks of parents that all work in good faith regarding the important things happening in the district. And we've talked about everything from lattes with Liz to public opportunities, you name it, just everything's sort of on the table, and figuring out what the best pathway forward is. Should we have a parent advisory? Should we just do regional coffees? Should we we are going to do PTA things because we've always, Dr. Sconzo's done that. We've always done that. That's pretty traditional. So if you have other ideas, I'm definitely open to it. I have to keep it in the balance of everything else, but I'm really interested in forming those networks and working with people who already have some stuff in place. I don't want to reinvent the wheel, but I want to make sure, so I'm kind of balancing the two things of I don't want to reinvent the wheel, but at the same time I want to make sure everybody feels included. And that's really important to me.
I have another one.
Okay.
I'm hearing a lot of district renovation questions, but as far as I know, we will be having a separate meeting in August. Where will we be able to ask more questions regarding that?
I believe there's a lot of Q&A on the website of the commonly asked questions, so there's information there. You can certainly email us, and we're happy to answer District of Innovation questions and anything else like that. Because what we do is we gather up the commonly asked questions and then we post them for everybody to see. And so we're going to continue to make sure that all that information is available.
Is there anybody else in the audience that has a question that they've not turned in, or if there's anybody else that wants to come up to the mic, please take the opportunity to do so at this time. If you have a card, would you raise your hand? I'll make sure some of our staff pick it up. If not, we'll just keep going until we don't have any more questions. Yes, sir.
I don't have a question, I just have a comment. I'm a founder of the Institute for Civility and Government. I work with members of Congress. I've gone to numerous town hall meetings, and sometimes they get up. That's why we have started to build a movement to bring more civility to the government process. And I'm here just to say thank you for your civil way of responding to the concerns of the community. Thank you for coming to this area. I'm new to this area too. I've been here, I think, 6 weeks. So, we'll see what we can do.
Well, thank you for being here also. And thank you for the work that you're doing.
I would want to talk to you at some point.
Okay.
I've worked with problems with students, and I've got a lot of students that's way too long.
Oh, okay. All right. We'll get together.
We have another question.
Hey, I'm
Come
all
on
for
down.
civility in government, so.
Yeah.
I just thought of something I read in yesterday's paper. It was about excluding children from classes because they've been misbehaving. And this article said there's another option for that, and that
So at a really high level, I want to make sure I say that there are certain things for me. I'm always wanting to work in the best interest of each and every student, absolutely all the time. But when we're talking about safety, there are some things that are deal breakers, and the interest of one does not outweigh the safety of many. And so that's one thing that I'm really strong on is student safety. Now, that said, we all understand that there is a need for more mental health options and opportunities and support for some students. Without going into any detail, there's a lot of that work that's happening with a lot of benefit for particularly young children who have had trauma in their life, and therefore they respond to things differently than a child who has not. And so if a child can be served within the context of the school and the classroom, we know that that's best. But there is that line of safety that we have to make sure that we don't cross. So I didn't read that article, and I don't know the details of it, so I don't feel competent to respond to it specifically. But I will tell you that I think today we're responding more and better and being more successful with a restorative approach for kids who are young and didn't know better, at the same time maintaining a pretty strong position on things that are very unsafe in schools. So that's the balancing that we're trying to do right now, so that we're making sure that we're meeting kids where they are, but we're not endangering the majority.
Are there any other, again, questions that you have a card, you just didn't get it picked up? Or if there's any other, we still have 6 or 7 minutes prior to me saying that would, our time has come. I do want to give ultimately Dr. Fagan an opportunity to close things out, but I'll also want to make sure that any patron that's here tonight has the opportunity to be heard. Yvonne, what's our total tonight here in attendance? Okay, so as a moderator, I'll wrap it up and I'll turn it back over to Dr. Fagan. This is our third one. I'm doing the numbers in my head. I think there was 250 something the first meeting. There were almost 100 at the second one. You just got the number here. That's close to 600 people. I think that speaks volumes about our community. I think it speaks volumes about our leader. I do appreciate the gentleman's comment about how you come together as a family, how you come together as a community, and be able to have your voices heard. So again, from a moderator's perspective, I appreciate the opportunity to ask your questions. And so, with further ado, again, I thank you so much for the time, and we look forward to other opportunities to be proactive here in Humble ISD. And I'll turn it back over to Dr. Fagan with some closing thoughts. Thank you.
Well, I just want to briefly say thank you for being here, for giving your time, your attention, asking your honest questions. I feel like you were genuine, and I really appreciate that. I've really enjoyed each and every one of these. I feel like we've had an honest dialogue. I appreciate the opportunity to get to know you and hear your concerns and hear your voices. I've learned a lot just in the 3 town halls about parent-student concerns, about over-testing, about, you can see from here the head nods on certain issues, and it gives me a good sense, although not scientifically based at all, about what kinds of things that we want to do together, or at least we might want to do together. And so I really appreciate you coming. I appreciate your approach. I feel like I have been treated like a person, a mother, a teacher, a principal, a new member of your community, somebody who wants to put down roots and raise a family and contribute and be your neighbor and be a leader of your school district and help you solve your concerns and celebrate your successes. And I believe that you all want to move forward in the best interest of your children. That's come through very loudly, and I could want nothing more than that. So I look forward to the days ahead where we can work together, where I will have more information to share back, and I won't constantly say, I don't know that yet, I don't know that yet. But I actually think it's a bad leader who comes in and says, I'm here and I have all the answers. What have you been waiting for? Right? I'm here, we're going to change these 25 things because I know everything, and this is what we should be doing. I don't think that's right. In my opinion, the best leader is the one that comes in and listens first and listens for a long time with intent to understand before being understood. And so that's what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to skirt your questions. I just don't have things that I'm like ready to do. I don't have that. What I'm ready to do is exactly what I've stated. And I hope that over the next 100 days or so, you see that exactly play out the way we've discussed. And then from there, we'll go together. Sounds like we're going to do some legislative fun together. That's always good. The good news is it's only every other year here. Seems like a never-ending thing in other states. So I appreciate it. Thank you for your time, your attention, your kindness. Thank you for the welcomes. That couldn't mean more to me. You don't know how honored I am to be here and how excited I am to be part of this community and school district. And I really want to do the work that you're going to be excited about. So thank you so much for being here, and we're done. All right.